Hello everybody! So I wanted to do a brief demonstration of not just one, but two different ways that you can use materials, raw materials, physical materials for this project. This is for the figure ground reversal project. So bear with me. Again, I can't say it enough. I will be showing you two different ways that you can create. So you want to choose either or you can, of course, do this with the digital media as well. So, but if you choose to work with physical materials, this demonstration will give you two different ways in which you can do so. So choose whichever one you would like if you're working with physical materials from this demonstration. Now, the first way that I would like to show you, I've actually already started on the back of this paper, and that is using marker. Now, you will notice that I have a couple of different type here. I do have some micron pens. They are different sizes. And then I also have this brush here. It's kind of like a brush. It's a marker. It's a brush on one side, and it's a little bit more of kind of a pointed line on the other side. So I have a couple of different variations in which to choose from because variety is the spice of life. So that being said, I will demonstrate this first, and then I will demonstrate the second way of doing it, which is to use cut paper. Now, we will be working in black and white only for this project. So you will want to have a white sheet of Bristol board or Bristol paper. You can see that nice thick page, that rigidity to it. So Bristol board is very important. Then with your black paper, you will want to make sure that it is a type of cardstock or that it is also rather rigid. You do not want to use soft construction paper because it will make your life miserable. It will tear. Sometimes that black pigment isn't as black. It can come off as like kind of bluish or purplish. So you want it to be a good, dark, crisp, clean black. You don't want it to have that purple or blue hue in it because, you want this to be a black and white project. So without further ado, let's talk about step one, and that is to create a symbol. My symbol are some leaves. I chose leaves for the reason of I absolutely adore autumn. Now, I want you to create a symbol that represents you in some capacity. Now, for me, and it could be silly, it could be fun, it could be serious, it could be anything like that. I chose something that is a little bit all-encompassing. I absolutely love autumn. It's my favorite time of year. So much, in fact, that my sons they will bring leaves to me instead of flowers. So it kind of has a duality in that, it's not only just like me, my favorite, and my artwork. My artwork has a lot of autumn leaves and themes like that to it. But also, I go on a lot of nature hikes with my boys, and something cute that they do that we have together. They bring me autumn leaves. They bring me leaves. So I have two little leaf shapes there, just kind of keep it a little bit interesting. There's some overlap. And what I did notice that I did make it out of another piece of paper. I went ahead and made it out of the black paper for the next demonstration, but I made it out of that so that I can trace this. Now, even if you're going to use whether you're going to use markers or if you're going to use cut paper, you will want to still most likely trace out where you're putting everything. So even if you are going to glue back over top of that, you have an idea of where everything is, whether you want to add or subtract anything. So good planning beforehand. I also do have some Elmer's rubber cement. If you use rubber cement, always, 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 always use it in a ventilated area. I always open the window that is directly this way from me. I mean, we're talking I'm reaching out and I'm touching the window myself right now. So that close, and I always keep the rubber cement right up by it. So if you're going to use rubber cement, please, please, please always use it in a well ventilated area. That goes for any supply that may have any kind of fume to it. So that's my disclaimer. Once you have your symbol, again, something that kind of represents you in some way, shape, or form, that you have created and you've cut out, you can then take it and you want to replicate it. So I really like radial symmetry. So I may go ahead and just make it go out and around like this. So I would go ahead and start, and I would trace it very lightly with a graphite pencil. It does not have to be perfect, but I do want to be very careful that I don't get any of that. So it's very light, as you can see. Now, if I'm going to glue this down, I don't have to worry about adding much of anything else to it. I would just glue that in its spot. Once everything dries, then I could take my kneaded eraser and kind of take away those marks. But because this is a, you know, essentially I would be using this for marker, I would go ahead and I would create, I like that curve better. There we go. Create my curve. And I would repeat this. So I could overlap them if I wanted to. I could keep them separate. They can go off the page. However you want to do that. Then once you have your symbols on there, then what I want you to do is take and make up to 3 lines. Let's say 2 to 3 lines. And they could be diagonal, they could be straight across, they could be curvy, but I will tell you this much. When it comes to not only the way that you break up your background, but also the way that you create your symbol, you don't want to go too busy. You don't want to go underwhelming either, but you definitely don't want to go too busy. And let me show you why. When I created this, I did a couple of things wrong with it. And let me zoom out just a touch. So I did a few things wrong. Number one, I made my leaf forms too intricate. I had this little bend as if it was curling. They had really long stems. So while it looked great in theory, just on its own, once I got it together, it was way too complicated. And it may have been even better if I maybe, instead of putting the stems together in the composition, would have flipped it and done it that way. That may have solved some issues. But I also decided to make my 2 lines out this way. And then I realized that I needed more than that, and I probably should have done some diagonal, so I went ahead and cut it this way. So a lot of different sort of errors were made. Another thing is that if you look at the way that I colored, I got to a point where I was just going real fast and just trying to get it done. My poor marker was running out of ink, and you get these sort of inconsistent fill-ins. You see this here? That is not good craftsmanship. You will be marked down for craftsmanship that looks like this. So be cautious of that. Another thing I really wish I had was a little bit more line variety, so variation of line. So that is the introduction of different line markers as well. So another thing that I feel that this one misses the mark on is that there are too many spaces that are similar next to one another. So the idea is, again, we're using black and white only, but we want to get black and white next to each other as much as possible. So we want to try to eliminate having like white next to white or too much of a black next to a black situation. So we want to break it up and have that push and pull between the two so that you get that really beautiful contrast. You know, you can have really nice areas. I wouldn't even call that a nice area, but you know, you can have nice areas that do that push and pull and get that really interesting, really pretty kind of positive and negative space there. So what not to do. So I went ahead and I started this on the other side. Again, as you can see, I have broken up the background with some diagonal lines this time. I kind of made sure that they brought all the way through. Is it perfect? No. And let me show you why. There's a lot of negative space over here, and I really wish that I would have broken it up more. I could go back if I wanted to and maybe make one more of these somewhere, kind of coming off of the side or tucking up behind that or something to that variation. So that's the virtue in planning it out with your pencil ahead of time. You will also notice that there are teeny tiny little bees on there. I'm pre-planning where my blocks of color are going to go. So if I'm coloring this part black, this would stay white, this would stay white. So in theory then, I really kind of want this whole area to be black. That's a very large space to have black. Do you see that being problematic? Because that means that I have to keep this white and I'm going to have black touching there. And that would mean I would have to keep this entire area white. So that's a lot of white too. So my negative space is really not broken up the best that it could be. So maybe I would decide to go ahead and break it up like that. That might help to give it a little more variety. And so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. I think you can make up to 5. I'm going to go ahead and just go for it. Make that 5th line all the way down like so. I didn't do any curved lines because I have a very curvy shape, symbol. So I'm just going to go like that. And I think that makes it much better. So if this is black, that's white. This is white. This is black, white, black, white, black. That's white. Oh, you know what? I don't want to put the W's there because I want to leave it white. So that's white. That's black, white. Yeah, that's definitely. Now you also have like kind of this fun little moment here where it's this little tiny wedge. So if that's white, that's black, that's white, that's black, that's white. Keep doing the W's. I think that this would be a neat little piece. It would be black if that's white, that's white. Yeah. So as I have finished figuring that out, instead of just starting with this, I'm actually going to go ahead and bring out my little Micron pens here, and I am going to readjust that. Sorry, I keep bumping it. Let me go ahead and I'm gonna just place some nice, clean, crisp lines. Now this does help in going back over some of your spaces too. That's gonna help to clean up any little spots that maybe didn't come out as well. Now this is a water soluble marker. So if I really wanted to, if I have enough on there, I can kind of clean that up, those little streaks up a little bit by taking some water. But I want to be careful of a few things. Number one, water is the solvent for this. That means that it will make it a lighter color. So it's not going to be pure black. So I have to be careful with how much water I put on that. I also want to be careful with how much water I put on this paper, because this paper is not watercolor paper. It's not mixed media paper. It is Bristol. And while it is nice and rigid and it has some thickness to it, it doesn't really hold water that well. So you do want to be really cautious that you don't put too much water on there so that it doesn't mess with the integrity of the surface of the actual paper itself. So I will go through, and I like to work section by section. Oh no. Well, now I have made a mistake. I'm going to go through and I'm going to fix that mistake the best that I can. Accidents happen, right? There, not too bad. So go through and just work section by section. Or if you prefer to get all of one thing done and then move on to the next, you could do that as well. There's no wrong or right way when it comes to process. Whatever works best for you. I want you to still have fun and enjoy this process as a whole. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this. I get really excited about having larger areas next to smaller areas. I think that is what makes this a really, really fun and exciting project. It gives it some interest and really makes it kind of jump around. Again, I want to be real careful with the way that you use your markers. So I'm going to use these smaller brush strokes because this is a little bit darker ink-wise. And now I'm going to go back over top with this, and that fills in really nicely. So if you have any markers like this is how I definitely recommend it. This is very helpful in creating a nice, solid, crisp, beautiful black without those streaks in it. Okay, so as I go on and finish coloring that part in as well, see the difference between using that other one and not. If I do it in the reverse, it's not as effective, but you can play around with the materials and figure out what works best for you. Again, I really kind of use this as a paintbrush. It helps if I have that mentality around it. So if you have markers like this, that's kind of a good mentality to have. And there you have it. So that is one way that you could do this project. And again, you just break it up very nice and slow. I think that this is off to a much better start than this one. Not nearly as confusing and has more of that defined push and pull between your negative and positive space. So yeah, that's the one way that you can do it. Now, the second way that you can complete this project is to take your page and figure out where you want all of your pieces to go that you have cut out. They don't all have to be completely black even. You could do a kind of combination of black and white. You can flip them around so that they're going around in different ways. And go off of your picture plane. Overlap. They can make them look like they're swirling in the wind. How does that sound? You know what? I don't like that. So let's go more like this. Okay. I would still then break up the background so that it is, you know, has lines maybe going like, ooh. And I would do this after they're glued down. But, you know, you kind of go and cut over top of these. Now, if that happens, and maybe you don't want to glue them down, again, this would be where drawing it out would be best. But you'd still chop up your background and then cut it so that you have black and white in the areas so that they're not next to each other. And it would be the same thing. Can you use white paper to do this? I'm gonna say sure. Can you use just black paper and use the white of the background on your Bristol? Absolutely. So I'm gonna let you have a little bit of freedom on that. Again, can't say it enough. If you use rubber cement, please use it in a well-ventilated area. You don't need a lot of it. If I'm going to glue anything down, I always, and my window is open right here, I always take just about that much. Don't need a lot. And I do the edges. It does help if you have like another piece of buffer paper to lay it down. And put this on a piece of paper that you don't mind getting rubber cement on. And you can more quickly kind of place that on there. It does dry quickly. You don't want globs. Notice that it's nice and smooth. And then I would take away my buffer sheet and I would place it where I had those lines drawn. Don't worry about those lines right now. Let it dry first, because if you try to erase with any eraser while that is wet, it will leave marks. And again, that is a ding on your craftsmanship. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out. Good luck with your project. Have fun and come up with something intriguing and interesting or fun or funny that you think would be a good representation for you.